My dear friend, if you listen carefully, you must have noticed that doubts, lack of faith in Christ run through the readings of today. Our first reading from the first book of Kings starts with the prophet Elijah at Mount Horeb. What is happening here? The prophet Elijah prophesied when Ahab was the king of Israel. King Ahab had married a Phoenician princess from Sidon, whose name was Jezebel. Jezebel promoted the worship of Baal, a pagan god. With this, most Israelites abandoned the covenant and worshipped Baal, including King Ahab. Consequently, the prophets of the true God were being killed. Those of them who survived went into hiding. However, the prophet Elijah took it upon himself the task of combating this false worship of Baal. Elijah organized a competition between himself on one side and the many prophets of Baal on the other side to determine the true God. Is Yahweh the God of the Israelites, or Baal, the pagan god? Of course, Elijah defeated them in that duel. In the end, Elijah encouraged the people of Israel to worship the true God. But Queen Jezebel was not happy. He was unhappy with Prophet Elijah. And he swore, he took an oath that Elijah must be killed. At this juncture, Elijah had to flee. He ran into the desert, ran and ran and ran for over 150 kilometers. Where was he going to? To Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai. And there, spending a night in the cave, he was instructed to go outside because God will soon pass by. And that was when those cosmic powers started happening, or cosmic signs. There was a great wind. Elijah thought that God was in the wind, but no. After the wind was the earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a great fire. God was not in the fire until there was a gentle breeze. What the reading today described as sheer silence. And that was where Elijah found God. So you find from that reading that Elijah, the prophet, great prophet of God, also had his own moment of doubt. He doubted that God had the power to save him. And so that was why he ran away for his life. A great prophet of God. In the second reading today from Paul's letter to the Romans, we hear Paul lamenting. You can feel the pains in his heart. Why? Because the Jews abandoned the covenant. They abandoned the covenant and started worshiping a different thing, not the true God. They didn't believe that Jesus was the true Messiah. In the Gospel from Matthew, not only that the apostles were frightened, thinking that Jesus was a ghost, but even Peter, the headmaster of the apostles, when he asked Jesus to allow him to come on the waters, he doubted. Because he doubted, he started sinking. But Jesus stretched out his hand, grabbed him, and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" So this is why I said that in all the readings, you find the whole question of doubt and lack of faith today. My dear friends, there are moments in our lives when we doubt the existence of God, especially in the moments of crisis. We experience being battered by the waves of unpalatable events and drowning in a sea of problems. It happens to us. We experience ecological problems today, like wildfires, flooding everywhere, erosion. Listen to the news. That's what we hear. We experience violence, all forms of abuse, poverty, addiction, pandemic, ill health. That's what we get. We are caught in the storms of life that have to do with our children, marriage, siblings, friends, work colleagues. At such moments, we feel that God has abandoned us and we tend to despair. All these problems treat us like the apostles of Jesus Christ, whose boat was battered by the unfriendly waves. The boat on the sea is one of the earliest Christian symbols for the church and its journey through a rough world. Just as the boat in which the apostles were inside was battered by the waves and strong wind, in the same way, the church is constantly troubled by her enemies. The readings of today tell us that in the midst of our problems or our crisis, God comes to us walking on top of whatever terrifies us. Walking on top of our problems, Jesus shows that he has power and total control over the forces of evil that threaten us. Jesus can calm the waves of storms and bring our fears under control, making it possible for us to enjoy peace. My dear friends, to guide my reflection this week, because of these readings, I have the following questions for myself. Number one, does it strike me that the prophet Elijah did not encounter God in the wind, earthquake, fire, but only in the sound of sheer silence? Does it strike you? We live in a very noisy world today. We do not have time for reflection. We do not have time to think about where we stand before God. We enjoy the noise. Nothing wrong. But sometimes, when I go out, I see some people with very heavy speakers in their cars. Music, blasting. Sometimes I even, I feel some little earthquake. What do you hear? Is that where you find God? Okay. But Elijah found God in sheer silence. We need time to recollect as individuals, as groups. 2, do I realize that in the moment of crisis, in the midst of my problems, Jesus is very close to me and waits for me to invite him in faith into my life? Peter had to cry out, Lord, save me. We need to cry out to God in prayer. Number 3, what is it that drowns me in fear, discouragement, and sadness? What? And finally, I ask myself, Jesus constantly says to me, you of little faith, why do you doubt? What am I doing to increase my faith? Sisters and brothers, let us ask God to increase our faith so as to reduce our doubts. Let us pray to realize that God is always present and ready to save us from all the problems that bother us if we approach him in an atmosphere of prayer and deep faith. Let us pray that God may keep our eyes focused on him in all the storms of life that we experience.